The rain tapped gently against the windows of Lotte Jardin, a high-end restaurant nestled between art galleries and yoga studios in San Francisco's Marina District. It was the kind of place where menu prices had no decimals and customers rarely arrived alone, unless they came with a booking agent or a press team. But on this particular evening, a solitary figure stepped through the door, coat damp, heels clicking with quiet defiance. Letitia James did not come to be seen. She came to disappear. No entourage, no photographer. Just a low bun, a charcoal gray trench coat, and a birthday she had no intention of celebrating with anyone else. Her staff had tried, of course. At least do a dinner with donors, one had pleaded. Or a virtual town hall. Call it a community check-in. She declined them all. What she needed wasn't exposure, it was distance. The hostess glanced up with the vacant efficiency of someone used to cataloging power without engaging it. Seeing nothing extraordinary, no red carpet cues, no high fashion, she gestured toward the reservation list. Name? James, Letitia said quietly. Table for one. Something near the back, if possible. The hostess gave a polite nod and led her toward a small corner table, out of the way but within range of the window's filtered city lights. No one recognized her. That was the point. In the kitchen, Miguel Ramirez dried a wine glass with one hand while scrolling through a rejected treatment plan on his phone with the other. His mother's latest prescription had been denied again. His sister's tuition bill had just posted. The calculator app said the math didn't work out. He was inclined to believe it. Yo, table 15, Sarah called from the bar. Solo diner. Looks like she borrowed her outfit from a courthouse lost and found. Miguel peeked through the kitchen door. My section, he muttered. Perfect. Another one who'll spend 2 hours nursing a glass of house Chardonnay and ask if the bread's complimentary. Carlos ducked in from the hallway. Heads up. Chef Ost is in meltdown mode. Someone just left a Yelp review comparing his creme brulee to a Pop-Tart. Miguel sighed, tied his apron tighter, and skimmed his notepad. Table 15 would be his 6th of the night, and it was barely 8:45. He headed out, lips drawn into the kind of smile that said, I won't fight you, but I won't save you either. At her table, Letitia flipped through the menu but wasn't reading it. Her thoughts kept circling back to Albany, to budget battles, to headlines, to a prosecutor's letter she hadn't responded to. She reached into her coat pocket and silenced her phone. It buzzed again anyway. Good evening, a voice said beside her. I'm Miguel. I'll be taking care of you tonight. Would you like something to drink while you look over the menu? Letitia looked up, catching the trace of irritation barely disguised beneath the hospitality. Do you have a house Cabernet? Miguel tilted his head. We have a Chateau Delaunay, aged 8 years. It's 96 a glass. He said it like a warning. That will be fine, she replied, not missing the tone. He turned without another word and headed to the bar, muttering, Another one playing power lunch with Monopoly money. Sarah smirked as she shook a martini. What's the vibe? District judge? School principal on sabbatical? Miguel rolled his eyes. She's got non-profit director who thinks she's Oprah's written all over her. Watch. She'll mispronounce foie gras and ask for it well done. Letitia, meanwhile, was aware of the glances, the hushes, the looks. She'd been underestimated before, by reporters, by mayors, by boardroom donors who smiled for cameras and sneered off stage. But tonight, it felt strangely freeing. No one wanted a photo. No one whispered, A.G. James. She was just the woman in the corner booth. Miguel returned and set the wine down with minimal grace. A few drops splashed onto the linen. "Have you decided on food?" he asked, pen tapping like a metronome of impatience. Letitia folded the menu. "I'll have the duck confit, please." Miguel raised one eyebrow. "Very well." He jotted it down like a man filing a tax audit, then walked away before she could change her mind. Behind the bar, Sarah chuckled. "She went for the confit?" Miguel didn't look up. "She probably thinks it's French for confidence." "What do you recommend?" Letitia asked with the calm, even tone of someone used to cross-examinations. Miguel straightened slightly, as if insulted by the question. "Everything on our menu is excellent," he replied, voice flat as a government form. "But maybe you'd like to start with something simple. Soup of the day. It's more accessible." The way he said accessible landed somewhere between a health code violation and a backhanded condolence. Letitia raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She had spent her career listening to smug hedge fund lawyers try to rephrase discrimination as data-driven policy. So this was practically endearing. "It's $15, Miguel added, now speaking like a middle school teacher explaining decimals. "Lobster's market price. Much higher, obviously." Letitia's phone buzzed beside her salad fork. Another message about pending litigation in Manhattan. She ignored it. Miguel's voice had become the more pressing cross-examination. "I'll start with the foie gras," she replied smoothly, pronouncing it flawlessly, because contrary to Miguel's assumptions, not everyone from Brooklyn gets their French from food trucks. "And the filet mignon, medium rare." Miguel blinked, briefly thrown off by her precision, but he recovered quickly, too quickly. "Foie gras is quite sophisticated," he said, enunciating each syllable as if it were a classist slur. "It's not for everyone's palate." At the next table, a couple celebrating their anniversary stopped mid-toast. The woman looked up from her truffle risotto. The man frowned into his wine. No one said it aloud, but the entire room had caught it. This waiter was conducting a slow-motion character assassination, and enjoying it. Letitia didn't blink. "And I'll take a bottle of wine. You seem to know the list well. What do you recommend?" Miguel glanced at her modest outfit, then at the iPad wine list like a security guard scanning fake IDs. "We have a Merlot for $50, probably more suitable for your budget." Letitia didn't flinch. "Bring me the Chateau Lafite Rothschild. Sauvignon." There was a pause, a sharp, audible one, before Miguel replied. "That bottle is $2,500. "Yes," Letitia said, as if discussing parking fees. "The bottle will be fine." He walked off muttering something about wannabe diplomats with department store heels, and disappeared behind the kitchen door. There, surrounded by steam and stainless steel, he found his audience. "She just ordered the Lafite like she thought it was on happy hour," Miguel scoffed. Sarah looked up from garnishing a martini. "Her card's gonna bounce like a public housing check." Carlos laughed. "Remember that guy who ordered champagne and ended up Venmoing us his dignity?" Back at table 15, Letitia sipped her wine with unbothered precision. She had prosecuted crooked real estate moguls with less ego than this man wielded with a pen and a notepad. Miguel returned later, casually aggressive. When she pronounced Bordeaux correctly, he corrected her anyway, just to feel useful. When she asked for a sauce pairing, he sighed loud enough to shift atmospheric pressure. When she requested a second glass of wine, he offered her water on the house. Letitia's face didn't change, but her phone was now resting on the table, screen facing up, camera quietly running. The thunder outside rolled louder, the kind that shakes loose old assumptions. Inside, Miguel cleared her dessert plate and leaned in, as if delivering the closing argument of a mock trial he had already won. "Next time," he said, "there's a lovely Burger King a few blocks down. You might feel more comfortable there." Nearby diners paused mid-bite. A woman in a pearl necklace nearly choked on her duck. A man in a Brioni suit shifted in his chair like he was watching a Senate hearing with no off button. No one could believe the sheer gall of it, but everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Letitia tapped her screen, still recording. Her voice was quiet, but sharp. "The whiskey was smooth," she said, not looking up. "I'll take another." Miguel scoffed. "Are you sure you wouldn't prefer a glass of water?" "That won't be necessary," Letitia replied evenly. Back in the kitchen, Sarah intercepted Miguel as he reached for the whiskey bottle. "Seriously?" she hissed. "You've been roasting her all night like you're running for office on Yelp reviews. You think she's just some underdressed tourist?" Miguel shrugged. "She's got non-profit board chair energy and a Macy's clearance rack aura. Trust me, she's bluffing." Sarah gave him a look that said, "You're writing checks with your mouth that your job won't survive." And out in the dining room, the room's attention, once scattered, was now fully focused on table 15. The night was no longer just a shift. It had become a case study, a slow, smoldering trial. And Miguel? Miguel had no idea who was holding the gavel. "Don't you think you're pushing it?" Sarah asked under her breath, though her voice carried more admiration than concern. Like a voter watching a scandal unfold, not necessarily offended, just thrilled to be present. Miguel shrugged as he poured the whiskey with the grace of a man baptizing a tax audit. "Did you see the way she holds her fork? Like she's waiting for someone to swear her in before cutting the duck. And that foie gras. Total photo op order. You can always tell when someone's trying to impress a ghost of themselves." Sarah bit her lip, visibly unsettled. "I don't know. There's something about her. Feels familiar." Miguel scoffed. "Yeah, she's got that energy. You know, non-profit warrior by day, Whole Foods coupons by night. I've seen it before. Thinks being underdressed is a personality trait. Probably works in city government, spent all her budget on equity audits and forgot how to eat duck." Behind them, Chef Ost peeked from the kitchen window like a Victorian ghost watching a crime of taste unfold, his face contorted in a mixture of insult and intrigue. "She ordered Chateau Lafitte and asked for it with duck," he muttered in disbelief. "Then requested ketchup? On what planet does a person do that without diplomatic immunity?" Back in the dining room, the real diplomatic tension was building. Thomas, the manager, finally decided he had either waited too long or not nearly long enough. He approached with the expression of a man entering a Supreme Court confirmation hearing without knowing who was on the bench. "Good evening, ma'am," he said, forcing a smile that clearly belonged to a man who had Googled her mid-shift. "Is everything to your liking?" Letitia looked up from her phone. "Everything's excellent, especially the service. It has a distinctive flair." The comment landed like a sealed indictment. Thomas swallowed. "I'm glad to hear that. If there's anything else—" "Actually," Letitia cut in, "I'd like to order the chocolate soufflé. I understand it takes around 20 minutes?" From behind, Miguel returned with the whiskey like a man delivering a verdict he believed was already written. The souffle is quite sophisticated, he offered, ignoring the dagger in Thomas's glance. Perhaps a scoop of vanilla would be more appropriate for your palate. The silence that followed was not silence. It was suspension, like a courtroom held in breath before the foreperson speaks. But Letitia only smiled, calm and impenetrable. "The souffle will be fine," she replied. "And perhaps, when you bring it, you could explain to me exactly what makes it so sophisticated. I'd love to learn." For the first time all night, Miguel stalled. His mouth opened, then closed. The script had no line for this moment. He had trained for tantrums, not composure. At the anniversary table nearby, the husband leaned in. "She's someone," he whispered. "No one takes that much condescension and still tips without a press release." The wife didn't answer. She was watching the posture, the presence, the almost ceremonial way Letitia handled her wine glass. There was no need for security detail when a person carried themselves like a sovereign court. By 10:30, the rain had stopped, but condensation still clung to the windows like unanswered questions. The dining room had thinned, but not table 15. That table now existed in its own gravitational field. Miguel, back in the kitchen, glanced at the total. 3,247.85. More than his rent. More than he made in a month. He printed the bill with a blend of disdain and premature triumph. In his head, he rehearsed the scene of decline. The awkward apology, the declined card, the moment his gut feeling was proven right. He approached with the air of a man delivering a subpoena. "If you'd like me to walk you through the charges." "That won't be necessary," Letitia said, sliding a black card from her leather wallet. Miguel paused. The card was heavy, matte, and unmistakably not the kind of plastic you get from pretending. His mouth moved slightly, but the line he'd rehearsed was gone. The clock read 10:45. The diners still lingering in the restaurant would later tell the story with reverent amusement, like witnesses to a perfectly executed courtroom reversal. But in this moment, Miguel remained just another waiter with too much ego and too little foresight, about to learn that humility doesn't always knock. Sometimes it swipes, and the night was not over. It was, in fact, just beginning to cross-examine him. "Why don't you surprise me?" Letitia said, tapping her menu shut. "Something that pairs well with the soul." Miguel froze for half a second. That was not the flustered compliance he had anticipated. No humble brag, no stammer, no frantic glance at the wine list for validation. Just cool, deliberate composure, like someone who had stared down hostile state legislators without blinking. At the bar, Sarah was polishing wine glasses like they were crystal balls. She leaned in, not taking her eyes off table 15. "Miguel," she whispered, "doesn't this feel weird to you? She's way too calm. I've seen senators panic under less." Miguel snorted as he selected a bottle of Sauterne with the smug enthusiasm of a man prepping a trap. "She probably doesn't even realize I've been insulting her all night," he said. "These government types live in their own bubbles. They think being grounded means having a Prius instead of a driver." In the kitchen, Chef Ost was plating the sole with the precision of a man carving out diplomatic territory on a porcelain plate. He mumbled in French about Americans who ordered luxury and then treated it like brunch at Panera. Meanwhile, Thomas, the manager, stood near the pass, arms crossed, brow furrowed. "Something's off," he muttered, not to anyone in particular. "She doesn't flinch, she doesn't fuss. Who just absorbs sarcasm like that?" Miguel emerged with a glass of golden wine and returned to the table with his usual weaponized charm. "A Chateau Soudouireau," he announced, as if unveiling nuclear codes. "You may find its flavor a bit complex." Letitia examined it carefully. "Interesting choice. What made you pick a Sauterne?" The phrasing, precise, informed, landed like a gavel. Miguel flinched just enough to show a crack in his performance. "It's the traditional pairing for Seoul," he replied quickly, trying to regain his footing. "Though I imagine you'd prefer a Coca-Cola." At a nearby table, a group of tech executives exchanged glances. One discreetly pulled out his phone and began typing. No one was tweeting about crypto anymore. Table 15 had become the main feed. "Is your waiter always like this?" one of them asked Sarah. She paused, cloth in hand, then sighed. "Usually he's harmless, but tonight I think the customer triggered his inner budget committee." Letitia, meanwhile, was adjusting the angle of her phone on the table. She wasn't live streaming, but the red circle on the corner of the screen was quietly recording history. "Mind if I record some notes?" she asked as Miguel approached again. "The atmosphere here is oddly enlightening." "Oh, are you drafting your next press release?" Miguel said, sarcasm dripping. "Or maybe working on a rebrand? Public integrity, now with Seabass." Letitia smiled slightly. "Something like that. It helps to capture raw moments, especially when they're so revealing." Back in the kitchen, Chef Ost piped a delicate rim of sauce around the plate with the solemnity of a treaty signing. Thomas joined him, glancing toward the window that overlooked the dining room. "August," he whispered, "look again. Does that woman seem familiar to you?" The chef squinted. "There's something. Maybe I've seen her on PBS or C-SPAN?" "She wouldn't come alone," Thomas muttered. "Not without a team, not dressed like that." Miguel walked in just in time to hear the tail end. "What are you two gawking at?" he said, adjusting his apron like a man preparing to serve a sentence, not a dish. "Have you noticed anything off about her?" Thomas asked. "Besides the fact she's pretending to know wine and ordered the most expensive bottle just to prove a point?" Miguel smirked. "Yeah, she's your classic government diva with a donor complex. Thinks a black card makes her enlightened." Before Thomas could reply, Miguel was already out the door with the soufflé, carrying it like a closing argument he couldn't wait to deliver. Sarah intercepted him at the bar. "Miguel," she said sharply, "one of the execs at table 6 showed me something. I think you should—" "I need to deliver this before it deflates," he cut her off. "You know, like her credibility." He arrived at Letitia's table and set down the dessert with theatrical flair. "Your soufflé. Would you like me to explain how to eat it? It's a touch more sophisticated than a Starbucks brownie." Letitia didn't even look up. "Please enlighten me. I'm always eager to learn." Again, the blow didn't land. Miguel was fighting with a ghost. Every jab went through air. It was the kind of unnerving power that came not from volume, but from knowing exactly how much silence costs. At the bar, Sarah was now visibly distressed, clutching the counter like a woman watching her retirement fund implode. Thomas noticed and rushed over. "What's wrong?" Sarah leaned in, eyes wide. "That woman. I know who she is." And just like that, the soufflé was not the only thing that had risen dangerously close to combustion. "Sarah, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Thomas's voice was hushed but urgent. Sarah didn't look away from table 15. She pointed discreetly, like a juror about to flip a trial. "Thomas," she whispered, "do you know who that customer is?" Before he could respond, Miguel stormed back behind the bar, his indignation riding high. Can you believe she just asked me about the science behind why a souffle rises? Like she genuinely cares about culinary chemistry. What is she? Chair of the Senate Committee on Meringue. Miguel. Sarah tried again, but he was already gone, summoned by a raised hand from Letitia requesting more wine. On the way, he paused at the service station to check his phone. 3 texts from his sister lit up the screen. Miguel, are you watching the news? Please answer. This is important. Tell me you're not being yourself tonight. He locked the phone. Drama, he thought. Probably Mom's prescriptions again. The world was heavy enough. He didn't need a guilt trip in his apron pocket. At table 15, he resumed his performance. You know, he began, pouring slowly. It's refreshing to meet someone who pretends to care about gastronomy. Most of your type just want the receipt to show off how cultured they are. Letitia took a sip, meeting his eyes over the rim of the glass. And what makes you so sure I'm pretending? Miguel chuckled, insulted by the question. I've been in this business for 15 years. I know the difference between someone who appreciates fine dining and someone trying to cosplay class. The way you hold your utensils, your pronunciation of French names, and, honestly, the fact you asked for ketchup with a steak, it all screams new money with a Netflix login. The diners at the nearby tables froze. Forks paused mid-air. The executives, who had long since stopped pretending they weren't listening, now openly watched the table. One was already recording. 15 years is a long time, Letitia said, adjusting her phone again with the stillness of a chess grandmaster. You must have seen every kind of customer. Oh, absolutely, Miguel replied, somehow failing to read the warning signs glowing in bold font all around him. But you political types, public sector elites with private sector envy, you're the most fun, always talking about the people while eating food priced above minimum wage. Your world-changing speeches, your climate resolutions, your press conferences about social justice, and here you are ordering Lafitte with foie gras like it's a last supper for credibility. Letitia tilted her head like a judge watching a defendant talk himself into prison. And what do you think about electric vehicles? Miguel snorted. You mean like Tesla? Please. Elon Musk is just a billionaire LARPing as Tony Stark. At least he knows how to dress for dinner. And then, silence. Miguel caught the flicker in Letitia's expression. Not offense, not shock. Just amusement. That same calm she had worn all evening now felt less like humility and more like control. And suddenly, the pieces started to fall. The poise, the precision, the prosecutor's calm, the quiet phone recording, the questions asked with surgical sharpness. At the bar, Sarah had both hands over her face like she was watching a car crash in slow motion, and she just realized her friend was in the driver's seat. Thomas had taken 3 steps toward table 15 before he stopped, because he saw it too. Miguel was finally connecting the dots. Miguel stammered, his throat suddenly parched, voice thin as tissue. Excuse me, ma'am, but you're not. Letitia didn't answer. She just watched him with that same expression prosecutors reserve for defendants who have finally realized their mic was hot the whole time. The restaurant clock read 11:15 p.m. The handful of diners still remaining had stopped pretending to be discreet. Phones were now flat on tables, recording. Even Chef Ost, normally allergic to drama that didn't involve béarnaise sauce, was leaning through the kitchen window like a man watching Watergate unfold over dinner service. Ma'am, Miguel whispered, legs starting to wobble beneath him. Letitia raised her hand, just enough to stop the train before it derailed further. "You were saying something about Tony Stark?" she asked, voice like velvet sharpened on a whetstone. Miguel's face turned the color of expired rosé. His knees might have buckled if not for the table. I didn't know. I mean, I never imagined that the Attorney General of New York might be sitting here, alone, dressed like a woman who didn't come here to be recognized," Letitia finished, smiling faintly. Before Miguel could process that, Sarah appeared beside him, materializing like an intervention. Her eyes met Letitia's. "Ms. James, I am so sorry. He didn't—" Letitia raised a finger. "I'm not offended," she said. "I'm just fascinated." "Ms. James, please accept our sincerest apologies," Sarah said breathlessly, having finally recovered enough to speak. "Miguel is usually very professional." "Is he?" Letitia asked, not harshly, but with the same curiosity she might bring to a witness changing their testimony mid-deposition. "Because for the past 2 hours, I have seen something rather different. Fascinating, I must admit." Thomas, now visibly sweating through his collar, stepped in like a substitute teacher summoned too late. "Ms. James, as the manager of Lottie Jardin, I want to express our deepest—" "You know what's most interesting?" Letitia cut in, eyes locked on Miguel. "It's the first honest conversation I've had in weeks. No consultants, no PR handlers, no one trying to predict what headline they'll get if they breathe wrong. Just brutal honesty." Miguel blinked. His brain had not yet caught up to the fact that the same woman he'd offered tap water and sarcasm to all evening was now holding court with half the restaurant at attention. "You're not angry?" "Angry?" Letitia let out a soft laugh, low and deliberate. "I've been recording this entire interaction. It's refreshing, in a tragic sort of way, to be spoken to like I'm beneath notice. No filter, no flattery, just someone saying what they really think, even when it's a little clumsy." At the executives' table, someone whispered, "This is classic Letitia, turning a PR disaster into a masterclass on power dynamics." Chef Aust had completely abandoned the kitchen and now stood at the doorway, arms folded, his mustache trembling. "Mon Dieu, she's critiquing my soufflé," he murmured with equal parts dread and wonder. Miguel suddenly remembered the soufflé comment. His stomach dropped, but Letitia, spoon in hand, took another bite and said, "To be fair, it's delicious, though I admit, ketchup might have been a provocative touch." That earned a nervous laugh from Sarah and a full-body wince from Miguel, who now felt like he had been personally filleted and served with garnish. His phone vibrated again. His sister, no doubt still trying to prevent what was now international content. "Ms. James," Thomas tried once more, "please allow us to make amends in some way. Dinner is on the house and— Oh, and deprive myself of the joy of using my own card after being lectured about my budget?" Letitia replied, pulling out the same black card that had earlier sent Miguel into a tailspin. "That would be anticlimactic, don't you think?" The way she said anticlimactic felt like a closing argument. Miguel heard his name from her lips and felt a full-body shiver. "Ma'am, about what I said earlier, about Tesla and billionaires and Tony Stark." Letitia nodded thoughtfully. "You're not the first to compare me to fictional billionaires, though most people have the sense not to do it while I'm recording." The phones were now everywhere. One of the executives had gone live. Another quietly typed, "Attorney General eviscerates waiter in real time. Restaurant implodes with dignity. Letitia took another sip of wine and turned to Miguel again. You know, brutal honesty is rare these days, especially in my world, where people have mastered the art of saying just enough without saying anything. But you... She gestured toward him with her glass. You went full truth. No edits, no tact, just raw, occasionally offensive truth. Miguel shifted, aware that every move now lived on at least 3 iCloud backups. Why did I do it? He repeated, more to himself than her. Then, louder. I guess I just got tired of the performance. Tired of serving people who come in here trying to impress, trying to act like the wine list is their birthright. And when I saw you, simple clothes, no entourage, I assumed you were just another poser. Letitia's smile widened. And the irony is? Miguel glanced around. That I finally treated someone like a human being, and it turns out I was talking to the Attorney General of New York. Outside, thunder cracked softly, as if the sky itself were chuckling at the symmetry. Rain began tapping once again on the window panes, slow and theatrical. For what it's worth, Miguel added weakly, your French pronunciation is terrible. Letitia's laugh echoed through the near-empty restaurant, slicing through the tension like a closing bell on Wall Street. Even Thomas, who had been clutching the wine list like a flotation device, cracked a smile. Miguel, Letitia said, lifting her phone, you've provided the most authentic material I've recorded in months. She paused. The question is, what should I do with it? And just like that, Miguel's heart froze. The night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. This night could have ended 1,000 different ways, and most of them involved Miguel losing his job, his pride, or both. But the look on Letitia's face didn't suggest vengeance. It suggested something far more unpredictable. The room, now emptied of the earlier bustle, held a strange energy. The recognition had passed, but in its place came a quieter pressure. The weight of being seen, truly seen, by someone who could decide your fate with a sentence or a shrug. Miguel stood still by the table, unsure if he was awaiting judgment or a job offer. Miguel. Thomas's voice cracked through the silence like a gavel. I think you should take your break now. But Letitia raised her hand without taking her eyes off him. Actually, I'd like Miguel to stay. I have a few more questions. Sarah approached with a new bottle of wine. Her hands shook slightly as she poured. Ms. James, perhaps you'd prefer something more exclusive from the cellar? She offered. This is perfect, Letitia replied, not even glancing at the label. Now, Miguel, tell me more about your views on billionaires playing Tony Stark. Miguel's throat tightened. His phone buzzed again in his pocket, but the messages now felt irrelevant, like voicemails from a life he had left behind an hour ago. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Letitia scrolled through her recordings with cool detachment. It's fascinating how quickly people's tone shifts when they realize who I am. But you. She glanced at the timestamp. You were brutally honest up until 12 minutes ago. In the kitchen, Chef Ost was furiously whipping cream like he was prepping for a final judgment. Sant catastrophe, he muttered. At the executives' table, phones were still streaming. Comments flooded the live feeds. Is this real? Waiter roast gone wrong? Letitia James is cold steel. Thomas, trying again, stepped closer. Ms. James, I understand Miguel's behavior was inappropriate, but he's been under pressure. His mother is ill. Is that true? Letitia asked, this time without irony. Her tone had shifted, still firm but more judicial. Miguel nodded. Pancreatic cancer. Insurance doesn't cover everything. I send money for meds and my sister's tuition. Letitia looked back at her phone. And yet, you offered me soup, because it was more accessible. Miguel winced. Yeah, that was ironic. Sarah returned with a chair. Miguel, sit down before you collapse. I can't sit at a customer's table, he responded automatically. I think we've passed that stage, Letitia said with a half smile. Miguel sat, or rather, sank. His legs gave out as if finally admitting defeat. The restaurant was nearly empty. Only the curious, the committed, and the quietly horrified remained, most of them watching from behind dessert menus they weren't reading. Letitia tapped her phone, playing back a clip. Do you really think I'm just playing at being innovative? Her own voice repeated from earlier. Miguel shifted. Not really. It's just, I've been serving tables in this city for 15 years. I've heard more revolution at this bar than in Congress. Everyone's launching an app. Everyone's disrupting something. Meanwhile, my mom's taking expired pills because Medicaid didn't approve the new stuff. Letitia leaned back, listening. And Tesla is changing the world, Miguel admitted. But not for people like me. I mean, I drive a 2005 Honda Civic. It barely makes it to my second job. So when I saw you, dressed down, quiet, alone, I assumed you were pretending to be one of them, the show-offs. And so you took it out on me? Letitia asked. Miguel nodded. Which was wrong. Unprofessional. I let my frustration get the better of me. Letitia swirled the wine in her glass. And refreshingly honest. Do you know how many people in my world tell me the truth without checking a poll first? Thomas, who had been holding his breath so long he was turning a shade of fiscal red, tried to interject again. Ms. James, we do appreciate authenticity, but Miguel's tone tonight was exactly what I needed, she interrupted. Think of it as an unplanned focus group, a field study in suppressed resentment. Miguel blinked, unsure whether he was being fired or quoted for a podcast. Letitia tilted her head. You've served the most influential people in the city, and instead of being impressed, you've become disillusioned. And when you thought I was one of them, a poser, a performance, you served me what you thought I deserved. Not wine, not soufflé, but the truth. Miguel didn't speak. He didn't move. He barely breathed. Because whatever was about to happen next, it would not be on the menu. How many public officials? Letitia asked, still tapping her phone with rhythmic precision. Actually know how they're seen by everyday people? Not analysts, not journalists. I mean the ones who clean your table, refill your glass, and still go home broke. The executives at the nearby table, who had been gleefully live-streaming, slowly lowered their phones. Something in her tone had changed. They were no longer watching a viral moment unfold. They were witnessing something much rarer. A truth few are willing to hear when it's not written by a speechwriter. Letitia's voice softened, but only in volume. There are consequences for our actions, Miguel. And tonight, you've delivered a rare perspective, one that's both valuable and, frankly, reckless. Miguel's heart sank. Here it came, the end of the line, the moment when all his worst instincts converged in a single humiliating fallout. I understand, he whispered, eyes fixed on the table. And I'll accept whatever happens. Just please don't have me fired. My mom's health insurance depends on this job. Letitia picked up her phone and replayed one of his earlier comments. At least he knows how to dress appropriately for dinner. She looked up, raising an eyebrow. The irony is, I dressed like this tonight on purpose, to avoid the parade, to have a quiet meal without being dissected like some reality show character. She paused. Instead, I got something far more educational. Sarah had been standing nearby, mouth half open, breath held. So, you're not firing him. Letitia looked genuinely puzzled. Fire him, she repeated. Why would I waste someone who isn't afraid to speak the truth? Miguel's eyes flickered upward. But I insulted you, over and over. My problem isn't your honesty, Letitia replied. It's your judgment, when to be honest, how to express it. But honesty itself? I can't buy that with a billion-dollar campaign budget. Miguel's throat tightened, tears welling despite his best effort to suppress them. The fear, the adrenaline, the exhaustion, it all began to break through. That said, Letitia continued, swiping through the recordings again, these clips are rather compromising. So the question is, what should I do with them? The silence was immediate. Every server, every cook, every executive froze. For a moment, time at Lottie Jardin stood completely still. Letitia tapped the screen again. You know what's most interesting about these recordings? It's not what you said about me. It's your entire view of the political class, of inequality, of institutional posturing, all from someone who lives at the intersection of service and survival. Sarah returned with another round of coffee, her hands now steadier. Ms. James, if I may, why did you start recording him in the first place? Instinct, Letitia replied calmly, accepting the cup. When Miguel made that crack about me not affording the lobster, something told me this night would be instructive. At the executive table, a well-dressed woman leaned forward. Excuse me, Ms. James, she said carefully, but this perspective, it's exactly what's missing from our policy circles. We talk about equity, but we never hear it. This is what the tech and political elite have insulated themselves from. Miguel shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. I wasn't trying to be a sociology project. The best insights, Letitia said, rarely are. Then her tone changed again, abrupt, direct, cutting to the core. Tell me about your mom. How much does the treatment cost? Miguel blinked. Around $12,000 a month. Insurance covers maybe a third. The rest, we scramble. And your sister? Partial scholarship, he replied. I work weekends and doubles to cover what's left. It's barely enough. At that, Chef Ost finally emerged from the kitchen with a plate of macarons, his French pride apparently softened by the gravity of the moment. Poor fool, he said, placing the sweets gently on the table. Miguel, mon ami, I never knew. No one did, Miguel said, his voice raw. I didn't want pity. I just wanted a little control over my night. Letitia didn't reply immediately, because she knew exactly what that felt like. I'd rather deal with sarcastic comments about pretentious millionaires, Miguel said, forcing a sheepish smile. They sting less than pity. Letitia raised an eyebrow. Speaking of sarcasm, she tapped her phone. He probably has a revolutionary startup in his garage. Miguel winced, then chuckled, cheeks flushed. The irony's not lost on me, especially since Tesla literally started in one. Letitia nodded. Though I suspect it had slightly better funding than your 2005 Honda Civic. A ripple of restrained laughter passed through the room. Even Thomas, whose tie had nearly turned into a noose hours ago, allowed himself a cautious smile. Ms. James, he interjected carefully, I understand you value Miguel's honesty, but as the manager, I can't overlook the fact that his behavior tonight was deeply unprofessional. Brutally honest, Letitia corrected. And yes, unpolished, even rude, but also real. And reality is in short supply where I work. I spend my days being told what I want to hear, in tones so well-rehearsed they might as well be AI-generated. Miguel caught his reflection in the base of a wine glass. Gone was the smug, cynical waiter from 2 hours ago. In his place sat someone smaller, maybe humbler, but undeniably more human. "If I could go back," he started. "Would you be more flattering?" Letitia asked, eyes fixed on him. "More fake?" The question hung in the air like steam off a dish just plated. Miguel glanced toward the executives, whose phones were once again back on the table, recording every breath. "No," he said slowly. "I'd be more respectful, yes, but the frustration, the inequality, that feeling of living in two separate Americas, that's real." Letitia leaned back as if some invisible test had just been passed. "What if I told you these recordings could be the start of something bigger?" Miguel furrowed his brow. "Bigger how?" "Bigger like a conversation this country's been too comfortable avoiding," she said. "A raw, unfiltered look at how power and policy are perceived on the ground, not by pundits, not by party operatives, but by the people who serve our wine and mop our floors." At the executive table, phones paused mid-scroll. Even Sarah nearly dropped her tray of espresso. "But before we do anything with that," Letitia continued, "we need to address something more immediate. Your mother." Miguel's heart thudded. "Ms. James, I wasn't fishing for—" "I know," she cut in. "That's what makes it sincere. You weren't performing. You weren't trying to impress me. You were just surviving." Outside, the rain softened into a mist, as if even the storm was leaning closer to listen. The clock now read 1 a.m. Lati Hardon felt less like a restaurant and more like a courtroom, and Miguel was mid-testimony. "I'd like to play something specific," Letitia said, scrolling back. A familiar voice echoed across the room. "In my position, people are usually fake. You treated me like any other customer, though not in the best way." Letitia's tone grew contemplative. "It's fascinating. When people realize who I am, investors, lobbyists, even staffers, something shifts. Masks go on. Every word is calculated." Thomas cleared his throat. "Ms. James, once again, we'd like to express—" "How many people report to me directly?" she asked, turning to Miguel. He blinked, confused by the pivot. "Hundreds?" "Thousands," she confirmed. "Now how many of them dare tell me when I'm wrong?" From the coffee station, Sarah muttered under her breath. "After tonight, probably one fewer." Letitia grinned. "On the contrary, tonight made me realize I need more people like Miguel, people not trapped in the ecosystem of applause, people who don't rehearse their outrage in Slack threads." She turned back to him. "How long have you been doing this?" 15 years, Miguel said. "Half my life." Letitia nodded slowly. 15 years, serving the elite, watching us up close, hearing our speeches over filet mignon, reading our policies off the backs of receipts. That makes you more qualified than half the analysts I get briefed by." Miguel swallowed hard, because for the first time that night, he wasn't just being listened to. He was being recruited. 15 years, Letitia repeated, her gaze fixed on Miguel, listening to the ambitions of people who will never know what rent looks like in the third week of the month. At the executive table, a few uncomfortable glances darted across designer frames and folded arms, because when truth comes from someone with no agenda, it hits harder. "In all that time," she continued, "you've developed something rare." A perspective that isn't shaped by incentives, one that sees through the branding, the slogans, the moral posturing, right into the rot. Miguel's throat tightened. Ms. James, about earlier. My comms team, she said, cutting in with a lawyer's precision, is full of brilliant professionals. They're articulate, strategic, impeccably non-confrontational. I can't fault their polish, but they're terrified to offend anyone, which means they tell me everything except the truth. Chef Ost emerged again, white apron now dusted with flour. Madam, are you saying what I think you are saying? What I need, Letitia said, ignoring the interruption, is not another memo wrapped in legalese. I need someone who will tell me, clearly, without filter, what the public actually thinks, even when it's messy. A silence fell so dense it pulled the room inward. At the executive table, one woman leaned forward. Ms. James, are you offering him a position? Letitia leaned across the table, eyes level with Miguel's. What would you say if I did? Somewhere across the room, a wine glass shattered. Sarah stood frozen, staring at the stem she had just snapped in her hand. Miguel blinked. A job? At my side, Letitia confirmed. Not to polish my image, not to write sanitized statements, but to offer what you've given me tonight. Raw, unfiltered truth from the other America. The one we like to reference in speeches, but never listen to. Thomas nearly stumbled into a chair. But he insulted you, mocked you, on a night like this, with a dining room full of media. Exactly, Letitia said calmly. And in doing so, he gave me more insight into how we're perceived than any focus group, poll, or consultant ever has. Miguel looked around, half expecting someone to jump out and declare this all an elaborate prank. But I don't know anything about political communications. That's why I'm asking you, Letitia said. I don't need another tactician. I need someone who knows what a $30 entree feels like when you've got $30 until payday. At the executive table, pens scribbled. Phones resumed recording. This was the moment, the twist no speechwriter would dare invent. The salary, Letitia added, will cover your mother's treatment and your sister's tuition, and still leave room for a used car that doesn't sound like a blender full of rocks. Miguel's eyes welled up. I don't know what to say. Say what you really think, Letitia said, arms crossed. You've done plenty of that tonight. Miguel took a breath, looked her dead in the eye, and said, Honestly, I think you're out of your mind. Laughter erupted. Sarah sobbing, laughing now. Chef Ost holding up a macaroon like it was a trophy. Probably, Letitia admitted. But it's worked for me so far. Miguel hesitated. What if I mess everything up? Oh, you will, Letitia grinned. But I'd rather have you mess it up honestly than watch another sanitized lie succeed. Sarah wiped her cheeks. This is like a Hallmark movie, but for the Department of Justice. Letitia extended her hand. Do we have a deal? Miguel looked around, at Sarah, at Chef Ost, at Thomas, then thought of his mom, his sister, and the quiet little Civic that might finally retire. He reached out. On one condition, he said. Letitia raised a brow. What's that? That I get to keep being honest, even when it's uncomfortable. That's not a condition, she replied. That's the job. Their hands met. The restaurant erupted in spontaneous applause. Chef Ost popped a bottle of champagne like it was Bastille Day. Even Thomas exhaled, finally understanding the lawsuit was off the table. You know what's the most ironic part? Sarah said, pouring the champagne. Your worst night on the floor turned into your best night in life. Miguel looked around at his co-workers, the streaming executives, and Letitia James sitting calmly with a glass in hand. My last night as a waiter, he said, raising his glass, taught me one thing. Always treat people with respect, not because they might be disguised public figures, but because it's the right thing to do. Though, to be fair, being a jerk somehow got me promoted. Laughter, toasts, relief, and in a restaurant that had once served only the powerful, the most powerful thing of all had finally arrived. Truth. The last time I served a table, Miguel said, raising his glass with a self-deprecating smirk, I'll leave a note for the team. Treat everyone with respect, not because they might be disguised public officials, but because it's simply the decent thing to do. Though, in my case, being a jerk somehow landed me a better job. Laughter broke out again as toasts circled the restaurant. The night had blurred into morning. Outside, the rain had stopped. Dawn stretched its soft fingers over the San Francisco skyline, but no one seemed in a hurry to leave. A week later, Miguel sat in his first strategy meeting at the office of the New York Attorney General, no longer taking orders, but giving honest ones. His new salary more than covered his mother's treatment, his sister's tuition, paid in full. His task that day, reviewing a public statement and marking it with brutal, unfiltered notes. Letitia had made it clear. No spin, no fluff, no per my last email diplomacy. Just truth. Back at Latte Hardon, the dining room now echoed with breakfast clatter. Chef August, inspired by the night's insanity, had whipped up croissants and a warm mushroom quiche. The room smelled of flour, butter, and second chances. You know what's hilarious? Sarah said, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. All those customers who tried to impress Miguel with French wine names, and he ends up landing a job by doing the exact opposite. Miguel, finally breathing like a man who'd slept, laughed. Maybe I should update my resume. From mocking billionaires to advising the Attorney General. I prefer brutal honesty specialist, Letitia quipped as she entered from the terrace, still in her wrinkled sweater from the night before, holding her phone like a courtroom gavel. She seemed, for once, relaxed. One of the tech executives, still lingering in last night's blazer, approached. Ms. James, he said, I've already rewritten half my next keynote. This, what happened here, might change how we think about feedback in public institutions. Go ahead, Letitia replied, but make sure you credit the souffle. That was the turning point. Thomas returned from the back office, clipboard in hand, looking bewildered. Ms. James, about the bill? Charge it normally, she waved off, and add a generous tip. Consider it Miguel's final service, at least in this building. Chef August waddled in, holding a sealed envelope. Miguel, mon ami, I give you the secret recipe for my soul. For when you host your first government event and need to intimidate someone from the SEC, Miguel grinned. After how I treated your most important customer, I think you owe me a few favors. The room filled with chuckles. It was no longer a restaurant. It was a memory being carved in real time. Miguel checked his phone. 43 unread messages. He scrolled through texts from his sister, a video from his mother in tears, and a single voicemail he hadn't played yet. He looked up, eyes glistening. I need to call my mom. Use my office, Thomas said, suddenly paternal. And Miguel? I'm sorry for every time I told you to tone it down. Clearly, you knew something I didn't. As Miguel stepped into the back room, Letitia turned to the remaining staff. "Do you know why I really hired him?" she asked, swirling the last drops of coffee in her cup. Heads turned. "It wasn't just for his honesty," she said. "It was his ability to see through the theater. In a world full of performers, it's rare to meet someone who tells the truth, especially when the room doesn't want to hear it." Sarah collected the champagne flutes and paused. "And the recordings?" Letitia smiled. "I'll keep them, as a reminder that sometimes the best insights come from the most unexpected places. And maybe, when Miguel's giving his first press conference, I'll play a clip, just to see his face." In the office, Miguel sat alone, phone pressed to his ear. His mother's voice cracked with joy on the other end. "Mijo, they hired you? You're not just okay. You're more than okay?" Tears ran freely now. "Yeah, Mom," he whispered. "Everything's going to be okay. For real this time." When he returned to the dining room, someone had taped a sign above the wine shelf. "From waiter to watchdog, a New York tale." Miguel stared at it. "That's a bit much." "Oh, you haven't seen anything yet," Letitia said. "Wait until the press finds out. Waiter insults AG Letitia James and lands a government job. The headlines write themselves." Thomas asked, "Should we send out a release?" "Don't bother," Letitia said. "Some stories don't need spin." She looked at Miguel. "They just need to be true." The sun was high by the time farewells began. Morning staff filtered into Latte Jardin, blinking at the impromptu celebration unfolding like a victory breakfast. "Undur, you chose," Chef August said, presenting Miguel with a small wrapped package. "The recipe for my soul. Use it when you need to impress someone at the Attorney General's table." Miguel took it with a laugh. "Thanks, Chef, though I think my way of impressing people's changed a bit lately." As Letitia prepared to leave, she paused beside him, one hand on her bag, the other already on her calendar. "First meeting's Monday at 9 a.m. We'll be reviewing campaign finance disclosures, so eat breakfast." Then, lowering her voice just slightly, "And Miguel, keep that brutal honesty. Maybe just ease up on your opinions about my French pronunciation." "No promises," he replied with a grin. "You hired me for my candor, remember?" And so, as the light of a new San Francisco morning spilled over the city's glass towers and corner cafes, the story of a waiter who dared to be unapologetically honest with one of the most powerful women in America didn't end. It simply began again. This time not with a tray, but with a desk, a voice, and a seat at the table. Because sometimes in a city addicted to appearances, the one who dared to challenge the performance ends up writing the next act. Even if that act starts with suggesting ketchup for a $120 steak.